Ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀ lọ bá jó, ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀ lọ bá jó, olúwa mi ò dìde ojú
The Ashen Forge. The Ashen Forge.
Hello and welcome to the Ashen Forge. I am Phantom X, joined as always by Diggs and the legendary Neurotoxin. How are you two doing?
All right.
Pretty good.
Your eyes got real big there, Diggs. I don't know what's going on. So
Yeah, it's okay.
well, we have had a live stream come through, Cleric, which is our first look at that, and I think the first look at a staff. Is that right? Some of the weapon types as well.
A couple of weapon types.
Yeah.
Although I liked the ranger with the bow a little bit better. There was a stance that I didn't see before, which was kneeling. I hadn't seen the ranger kneel like that while I was doing its weapon usage or I didn't notice it. A couple of the weapon stances I actually really liked, or combat stances I actually liked. So
then we got to, day-night cycle, constellations, UI. So quite a bit.
We got to see the cleric. We got to finally see the cleric abilities.
So a lot to go talk about. So actually, before we start, though, there were two posts made on the forums that I've actually started trying to answer. I tried participating some. It makes me laugh. One was about the quality of the stream. Was someone basically saying it felt like this was not a very high quality stream, and that it should have been better. It seemed.
What do you mean? What do you mean by quality?
That it seemed disconnected. What did he say?
Lack of focus. Lack of focus, I think.
Yeah. Didn't communicate well. Didn't showcase things very well. Should have been much shorter and focused. I don't know.
I think the problem there was that it did not really match the outline. So Stephen gave an outline of what the demo was going to demo, and then they didn't do very much of the demoing of the stuff that he said they were going to demo, like active block. They showed active block once is the feedback that I saw. So he was more focused on just getting in and playing, I think. I think the complaint is that Stephen was more focused on just playing and doing the combat rather than actually demoing what he said he was going to demo.
Yeah. I'll be honest, I didn't really get a feel for like each of the characters and the weapons they're using and like the intimate and intricate sort of use of them in the environment and in the battles. It just kind of felt like, all right, well, we're people who've been playing the game and we're playing the game and talking about it. I liked what we saw. The thing that I wanted to see a little bit more of, or get maybe a little bit more explanation for, was how all of the abilities are going to kind of synergize off of each other's effects. There was the one example of the staggered stun sort of thing going on with putting down the AoE thing and then the chains on top of it. And that's pretty neat. I like that they've got that sort of thing. So the question is, I guess, is everybody going to have, some way or another to apply each of the various effects? And is everybody going to have some way or another to leverage to extend or kind of pop and use up the rest of like a DPS sort of thing, the effect that's on there, or to take like five layers of stagger and turn it into like a long stun or something like that to have a terminal sort of effect for it. is that something everybody's going to be able to do, or is that one of the things that's going to come down to either some classes have like some archetypes have access to things that other ones don't, for the most part, or if something else is going on where it's just like how it's all gonna play together. Is everybody going to be able to do everything, or is it going to be some people do more of the like application of debuffs and other people do more of the exploitation of those? Or that's what I'm kind of interested in seeing. I like the idea that there's going to be the diminishing return. So instead of everybody specking for stagger stun or whatever, that's not going to work out, because you're going to be doing that once or twice and then the enemy's going to be immune to it for a little bit. I would imagine it's going to be trying to rotate through different sequences and series of these sorts of things where you'll see like, all right, well, we're doing the stagger stun right now, and then once that elapses, we're going to switch over to a lot of AoE buffs for defense for us and debuffing the enemy's damage output. And so we're just going to go with mitigation for that phase. And, once that starts to wear out and the thing starts doing normal damage, we'll switch to a third rotation. And then after that, it'll, whoops, and pop filter aggro. It'll go back to the stagger stun one. So you would have to go through this sort of dance between the different types, and it might become like, okay, maybe one type is just not viable, and so you'll have to change and adapt for the situation. So that's the sort of thing that I kind of like seeing with it, and I want to see more of. But with what you've pointed out, I also want to see more of just show me like all of the new stuff and all the latest and greatest for the fighter and the ranger and the cleric in more of a like technical what they do and how they work right now sort of video, like one a piece or all three of them in one video if you want.
But we've seen Ranger and we've seen Fighter already,
Well,
and we
any
saw
changes that
Cleric
they've
in.
made.
I would much rather see the beginnings of the ones we haven't seen, like Bard and Summoner and Rogue, um, and to see the changes that they've made to ones we've already seen. Because we pretty much know how Cleric is going to work. We have an idea of how Fighter and Ranger are going to work. We have no clue how Bard is going to work. We have absolutely no clue, really. I mean, like 2%, 5%, how Summoner is going to work. Um, well, you know, show, not tell. Um, and sure, we have some understanding how a rogue should work, but show us how a rogue works in Ashes. Show us how a rogue works in. Show us how a summoner and a bard work in Ashes. We've already seen how Ranger works. We've already seen how Fighter works. Um, and once we at least see something, we can be more confident that Alpha 2 is coming up, kind of before summer of next year.
Well, it depends how many classes they're going to put in alpha.
Uh, all of them are supposed to be in.
Yeah. The other thing that was
The starter at the end.
Hmm?
At the starter at the
all
end.
all of the archetypes are supposed to be in, and yeah, if they're gonna wait until the end of Alpha 2, that also says something.
I mean, yeah, I think there are several things. Well, we'll get into some of the others, but even when they're talking about how to do active blocking and whether that's a stamina resource and some of these other things that aren't yet settled and have pretty significant impacts on gameplay, I think probably speaks towards where Alpha 2 will be. They asked, there was a question in there about 5.1, Unreal 5.1, and he said yes, they're transitioning to it and they expect it to be done by January, I think is where he put it. So I'm sure if that transition is happening until January, I don't know how quickly we would be thrown into an Alpha 2 test. I'm sure they want to make sure nothing's super broken before they do that. That might be actually now that I think about it, that might be when the spot testing occurs. That would probably make sense. Well, I guess it would depend too on what they want to test, but that would probably make more sense to let them get that conversion over and then start the spot testing.
For right now, I don't know that they'd be spot testing anything other than latency with users, and their hardware around the areas that people log in from. I don't know that they're actually going to be looking too much for like gameplay feedback. I'd imagine it's just going to be, hey, we're going to cram you in a place. You can look around and like do some stuff, and we'll see how it hits the server load. And that can be all it is.
The other thing was the other post that caught my attention was someone saying, give someone else a chance to demonstrate gameplay. Basically saying, get Steven out of there, and let somebody else who kind of, I think the basically was that knows what they're doing show off how to play. Just because this stream it seemed pretty bad with walking into mobs and other funny moments. So, which a lot of people actually agreed with the post. So I don't know.
I think it could be potentially a constructive way to do things for Steven to narrate what's going on that other people have, that they're going to be the ones playing and kind of, maybe have done a little rehearsal or whatever so they know what's coming through the area. So he can focus not on fighting and then talking about it, but instead just talking about it and kind of directing the video, as it were.
Theater Elf says that in chat. Theater Elf says that Steven is bad at his own game, as someone else posted. But not only that, we have to remember that Steven is a gamer who primarily, first and foremost, is a gamer who loves to lead his guild in battle. And I don't know how much battling he's necessarily doing while he's leading the rest of his guild in combat. He's a first-time game dev, and especially in terms of brand management or whatever, that's not his skill set. How best to show off a game demo is not his skill set. He doesn't have tons of experience with that, is what I'm saying. So, yeah, it's probably better to have someone who's good at demo and have Steven tell them what he would like for them to showcase.
Well, what's funny too is he says, I mean, he kind of pointed out during the show that he was not doing very well, and pointed out that he typically plays a tank, maybe a self-healing.
It's not like it's
version.
the first time he's sucked at his gameplay.
Well, let's go on it. Let's just get to it then. The clerics. So we'll kind of go by asking about their feedback. They had a series, 2 posts, one for clerics, one for night day cycles, to see kind of what feedback was. And do either of you have either of you played much with healer specs? Like, is that traditionally? I'm trying to remember.
I think I played cleric in the Alpha 1.
Yeah, I played some amount of cleric in Alpha 1 for sure. I played shaman when I was playing WoW. I do play characters with some amount of healing a lot of times.
Yeah, I think one of my most fun periods was the Templar within EverQuest 2. That's sort of what I started out with and stayed with for ever until I moved to WoW. Actually did.
Did the church provide you with the finest weapons and armor, or did you have to earn everything like a pleb?
Had to earn every single thing and earn
only a Templar and class name. What terrible RP.
And earn we did, because it was a lot of fun. So yeah. So what do you think? Seeing some of the spot heals, the group heals. I mean, it seems pretty typical for a cleric.
I like the visuals.
I'm interested to see how the what the heck did they call those charges? Not radiant
Conviction.
charges. Conviction, yeah.
Conviction.
I like that. I like the way it's set up, but the thing that I'm more interested in is how long it lasts. Because the thing I absolutely don't like is when you're playing something like this and you're building the ammo and you build and build the ammo, but then you can't use it for whatever reason. Either it expired because you took a break for a moment between fights like you're supposed to, or maybe you got knocked out for a moment, or knocked unconscious for long enough for it to stun whatever to have it time out. All the abilities that you would use it with or build it with are currently locked at the moment. I that's the sort of thing that I'm hoping won't be an issue, and that it's the sort of thing that'll last a while. That unless you go and change like some of your abilities, or like you're sitting around in town for like 15 minutes or something, that they'll hang around so you can do the short rest in between battles, and just naturally do a little regeneration and get your attributes back up, but not lose the ammo that you're building up. So as you go through deeper and deeper in a dungeon or a series of encounters, you have this resource that you're building up, and then you can choose when and how to expend it, instead of just building it and then you're kind of obliged to use it immediately because you're only going to get a little bit of it. That said, I also don't know how much you're going to get. If you're only going to get 5 stacks of it, that kind of implies, you're just grabbing it and grinding it, grabbing it and shooting it out. You're not really holding on to it for that long. So those are things that I'm kind of wondering to see, how that's all going to play out. But I do like it, and I like that it's kind of the one of the presentations of the unique system for that archetype. I don't know if using it as a secondary archetype will give you that sort of capability, or if that's the thing you wouldn't get. That's kind of an interesting idea, though, of the conviction system being built into the secondary archetype. And so that's how you're modifying your abilities as like a ranger cleric, for example, that you can, kind of power them up in this special way and have them do different effects for you.
Well, it did sound like they talked a little bit with it as a secondary, and that there would be some kind of personal heals, but I'm not sure what it would do to existing skills. But from a healing standpoint, they did say more personal heals, which again I think of Shadow Priests, and kind of I'm curious to see which way, is that a cleric main or secondary? I don't know, but Diggs, what'd you think?
Um, I was just thinking right now that one of the interesting things about this particular demo is that he mentioned double down on cleric being the best healer, especially for by design for an 8-person group. Some people are hoping that summoner using a healing pet and be the primary healer for the group. And I say, might be great. He's second best. Just don't expect summoner to out heal cleric spec for healing in an 8-person group. And I took from what Steven said that that's still kind of the case. Um, we'll have to play
Yeah.
to really see, but I expect the primary archetypes to each be best at their primary archetype, and secondary archetypes might be able to get close to it, especially if they're a 4-person group or 5-person group. But if you've got a cleric, don't expect any of your other classes to your secondary archetypes to out heal the cleric.
Like maybe if you go full battle cleric and full healer summoner, the two in that configuration will be, you know, roughly on the same level. But I would imagine they're just going to be mechanically different. That, you know, the burst healing and purging debuffs, adding protective buffs, that sort of stuff, that I would imagine will get augmented through the cleric stuff, isn't the sort of thing like the healing pet would do. I would imagine the healing pet's going to do something different. Like it's a frontline fighter, and every time it hits, it does like a little healing burst around it or something that heals nearby allies. Something more like that, perhaps, or that it's not actually a very intelligent healer, and it's just like, you know, it's looking for the last amount of the last damage spike anybody took, and it's just looking to heal that person until somebody else takes a damage spike. It might be powerful, sure, but it's not something you really have a lot of control over, and that specificity, again, is something that you would want to be getting out of the cleric, that the summoner might not be able to get their pet to exactly engage in. We'll have to see how those systems work.
It would be fun, especially as you start to open up to from 5 to 8 players in a group. Are you able to manage and perhaps manage better without a cleric? Like, what if you have a summoner who has a healing pet but can still DPS some? You have a shadow priest that can still heal some, but really. So what if you have some of these more modified healing types? That'll just be fun to test, I guess, to see sort of what that approach is. Maybe that's how dungeons will be run, but on a raid boss, maybe you need a more sort of traditional cleric. I don't know. Of course,
If
well,
your group is entirely made up of secondary archetype clerics, then maybe you don't need a primary archetype cleric.
yeah, it's an interesting question. And the only thing, I liked the single heals. I liked the, having to target to heal. We know there's not going to be sort of healing bots. They won't let add-ons. So with the conviction, that was fun. Yeah, watching the number of heals that it sent go up. I'm curious what the max is. Like, if you're in a raid, can you heal 5 people at once? Because it didn't look like that diminished at all either as far as strength of heal. The only thing I wish I would see that you just don't see outside of EverQuest 2 is sort of reactive heals. And they talked a little bit about this cleric gameplay being, whether it's reactive versus there's some planning as you're trying to heal, because you're sort of, you get people that run around and do crazy stuff sometimes as a healer. And one of the things I loved playing at Templar was the idea of reactive heals. So you would cast, you of course had your spot heals, your group heals, your heal over times, but then you had reactive heals, so that if the tank got hit, every time it got hit, it would heal for a certain number of charges, and you could specialize in that, and that's something I wish I would see in other games. That was a very fun way to play in groups. So
I feel like I've done that in with my druid. Probably I've done that with heals in other games, other MMORPGs specifically. I've used reactive heals, not as a cleric, but as a druid.
yeah, and one of the main big spells I can remember, now this was way back in vanilla, was just even a group reactive heal. Like, you had to specialize into it, which was super powerful. But when you had a lot of crazy stuff going on, it was just very easy to cast a reactive heal and a dot, and then actually the dot came afterwards, if the hot, I should say, if if they needed a little bit extra. So you mentioned status effects. They talked about that a little bit in the Q&A, and it sounds like it sounded like a little bit like everyone would probably have some sort of access to the generic tier 1 status effects. Again, thinking back to EverQuest 2, which I guess they do have a lot of Sony devs, they had the heroic opportunities where you could combine different skills across different classes, which would result in something, either a heal or a DPS or something, which this feels very similar to that.
Wonder, is it more powerful with other people than if you set it up yourself? For example, if I set up effect A and then exploit it with ability B, is that going to be more powerful than if somebody with the exact same build as me does that ability on that target with that effect? Or will it do the exact same range of effect? Because that would also kind of encourage the sort of group play and group synergy, that instead of you know everybody individually doing their setups and the however they're going to do the exploits on it themselves, that they're kind of trading off and working together, potentially to the point where in like a regular group that works together, you always have one person that has the most modified like opening stun, and then you have this other class of person who has the most modified guaranteed crit damage and armor debuff on a stunned enemy or something. And so you actually have people specify into their sort of like archetypal debuff exploits in such a way that you're not just doing the whole trade around, but you're able to fully synergize and get additional bonus on top of it for doing it right and good gameplay.
Well, I'm curious if there's a tier 3. Is there a tier 4? Like what about adding in, 8 other, 6? Well, I guess they had 3 people, 5 other classes, where does the craziness end?
What do you mean by tier 3? Because there's
Well, he
there's
mentioned tier 1, tier
3
2
of
status effects.
yeah, but I think it so far it goes up to tier 3, and we do have to see because I'm not sure.
Does it? He didn't mention
I don't
tier 3.
remember.
He just didn't mention it in the live stream. I'll have to wiki it.
No, I'm talking about information that we already
Yeah.
know based on previous information. I'm trying to think if that was specifically for what we were going to see in Alpha 1. I don't remember when the tiers activate for each upgrade to your active skill. I have to review that, but I think what we see, we can find that in the wiki somewhere. Examples of abilities as they upgrade, or active skills as they upgrade.
And I would hope, I would hope that some of these would not just be debuffs, but we talk about status effects on the monsters, the mobs, but do you get some sort of positive bounce back to the players? I think would be not out of the realm of possible. They mentioned they have I think 20 spots for buffs on your UI, I think is what he said. You can have 20 different types of things, which seems absolutely crazy, but
It seems reasonable, especially since we've got augments on top of those. So
Yeah, I mean, I think about every axis of thing that you interface with that could give you some sort of bonus or blessing or temporary whatever before you head out for something difficult. You get some blessing from the kingdom. The mayor gives you a parade. The temple does a special service in your honor. Whatever, you get all these things going, and that's before you even set out to go do the thing. And when you finally get there, you've got a bunch of these like 24-hour buffs going, and then you start putting on all of your small time like enhance your attributes for 15 minutes ones or whatever, and then I could see it getting really big.
yeah, so we have examples of rank 1, rank 2, rank 3 abilities for things like Blink, which is for the mage, I think, and for Javelin, which is for the cleric, also for Onslaught, which is for the cleric. That was Alpha 1. But again, I don't remember if that was just rank 3 is levels 1 through 10, which is what we had, or I think that's what we had in Alpha 1, right? Did it go up to 10 or 15?
believe it went up to
Whatever.
15.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe it's every 5 we get a rank up. I don't know.
I think it was just investing the skill points as you wanted in them, as you earned them to rank things up. So,
Yeah, it's still
and then there
be
was
some
like a
equivalent.
tree you had to go through.
Yeah, that's still some kind of equivalent. You're going to get more points. How many points do you have at level 15? Right. So.
Right, but I'm saying you might be able to spec into something at like level 5 to get it all the way to tier 3.
Mhm.
Anyway, yeah, and I have no idea. Have they actually showed us how all of those systems work now, or is it still everything we know is based on Alpha 1?
Well, I mean, they've made some changes. Like we did not have conviction in Alpha 1, so that's a significant change. And this was, I thought this was level 15. I thought this was a level 15 cleric. It seemed like he was
It was.
ramping up. Yeah. And then, um,
I guess I
what
mean
I'm,
what changes they've made in terms of how you gather and spec into your abilities, if there's any changes there, or if those are mostly the same.
I'm sure they had to make some adjustments, but I would very much like to see how augments work and know which things have been augmented. I have a feeling some things were augmented in the fighter demo, and probably in the ranger demo as well. Um, but it would be nice to hear a little bit more about that. How much time do we have before Alpha 2? How many more dev streams is what I mean by that. How many more dev streams do we have before Alpha 2?
I don't. Do we get one this month?
I didn't think so, but it sounded like they confirmed it on the stream.
Well, that'll be good.
Did we skip December last year?
I don't remember.
I typically expect to see something. It won't be. It might be a week early or a week late. I expect we still have something for December, but I don't super remember.
Well, one of the other questions that were posted on the forums, we're kind of going through what their feedback requests were. One was, should party composition amplify the meta? And we actually
What
talked
does
about meta.
that mean? What does that question mean?
But you'd have to ask Wagner, I guess.
Okay.
That was, I can read it word for word. Let me find it. It was, what, wait, do you think party composition should amplify the meta? That is exactly the question. So
Should amplify the meta. I think it's actually the opposite. I think they already intend and have kind of clearly stated at this point that the meta is one of each class. It sounded like to the point where it might almost even be like a force like hackneyed sort of maneuver they do where, oh, well, the only way you can get through this dungeon and do everything is to have one of everybody because, oh, you're going to get to this ritual spot. Well, you need a cleric for that. Oh, no, you need to be able to get this switch flip that's inside this box. Well, a summoner can summon a creature that spawns inside this invulnerable box and flips the switch. And so everybody is just needed for one little a specific thing that they do, and so you're kind of forced to have everybody like I think of like a really painful like maybe first or second edition D&D campaign sort of thing where like you have to have a rogue and you have to have a cleric and you have to have a fighter. And like you have to have a certain composition or you're just not going to win, but they don't tell you because it's supposed to be a hardcore campaign or something. Like that's I have a feeling that sort of thing might come up, but even without that, I definitely get the feeling that they intend for you to have one of each class with you in the 8-person party, and that's specifically why there's 8 archetypes and 8 people in the party. That's their intent. So beyond that, what the other meta is how you all spec together.
Right. So what does meta mean? How are we defining meta in this case?
I guess we would say the min-maxing stats side of things.
Is it most efficient tactics available?
Yeah, most efficient, most powerful, best practice sort of thing. What people have found to be the optimal.
Because I think they've said specifically, Stephen has said specifically before that he's designing. He seemed to kind of double down again on that here in this particular demo. I think that the expectation is that you'll want to have one of each primary archetype in an 8-person group. Then, barring that, among the various secondary classes you could have, the permutations of that, I think should not be beholden to meta. That should be, I mean, a cookie cutter answer. That should be up to the individuals, as long as you do have your primary archetype, one of each in your 8-person group. You should be good to go. And then however you finagle that with your secondary archetypes, you should be able to figure out a way to keep that encounter for the most part.
Well, this encounter was actually, I think, a good example because I know we would ideally have one of each, but they're specifically mentioning we're going into a graveyard. There's zombies. The cleric in this instance is very useful. Its damage type is much better against the zombies, but they pointed out that the hunter in this particular instance, as a nature-based attack, was not as effective. So I do think you'll have instances where you won't take one of all 8 unless there's a way to sort of change whatever type of damage output you're creating. And maybe there will be with augments or secondary.
Or just the type of weapon you've got equipped might modify your damage.
I don't know why you would not take a ranger to a graveyard. You don't need to have the ranger using cleric or a holy. You don't need to have the ranger. It's just like well, what I'm saying is you don't need to have the right. You have one person there who's got the holy damage. That should be enough. And then when you run from there to whatever else they're doing next, you might run into something that requires nature. It shouldn't be dependent upon.
Yeah, but the goal. I kind of disagree a little bit, just because the way this seems to be set up is that most encounters, most gameplay sessions do not appear to, the goal doesn't appear to be, from a development standpoint, that you, basically the adventure, right? It's long, big, open dungeons, where people will be in one specific spot for long periods of time rather than going from spot to spot. So I do think you're going to have, differences based off that night. Maybe your guild does a different dungeon tomorrow and it makes more sense to bring the holy damage in versus nature damage. But I do think you're going to have that.
I don't think the intention is to run dungeons every night. I don't think the intention is to run dungeons every time you play.
It might be. That might be how people want to play.
No, I'm saying based on the design, that does not seem to be what the design of Ashes is. The design of Ashes does not seem to be to run dungeons every time you play.
Well, if you're a dungeon hunter, that's going to really go afoul of their plans, because you're going to be looking for dungeons, getting clues from other people, and then dungeons.
You can do that.
I'm saying I don't think your PvE groups are going to be just roaming the countryside, killing whatever they find. There's going to be directed areas that your PvE groups will go, and that's going to be open dungeons.
Depends on what you're doing for your session.
And within
that, they could be questing, or they could be running caravans.
And within that, you'll find ways to do things faster. And that's all I'm pointing out, is that in this instance,
people people who want to do some kind of meta can. It doesn't mean that the game is designed for that. That's what my point is.
I think for this, for what we saw in those encounters and the gameplay, any 3 competent level 15 players that are properly kitted out could probably have gotten through that entire section just fine. And I'm not saying that about anybody's skill. What I'm saying is any 3 classes. You could go 3 fighters, 3 clerics, 3 anything, and they would be able to get through that content because either you're burning them down so fast because you do that much damage, you're doing damage in crowd control, you're doing damage and healing, you're doing damage, crowd control, and healing. You've got some combination of things that the 3 characters can do together to resolve each one of those battles. So that's kind of what I think about with it, is that, yeah, maybe that combination was okay for it. There might have been a much better combination, but they got through it just fine. Even, doing some ill-advised running into the mess and pulling sort of stuff, and they still got through it.
Well, it's funny. I'm laughing because what's funny is that there was a question about that too. Like, this seemed very easy. Is this, we were expecting a harder challenge, and the answer given was no. This, basically this was toned down. Like, don't expect this to be how easy. This doesn't represent the difficulty level upon release, which is just funny when you think about how hard Stephen was, how hard a time he was having. Like, if it was the intended difficulty, like, would they have all died?
Yeah, I don't think it was toned down. I think it just hasn't been ramped up. It hasn't been balanced at all for
I would
group play.
agree with that. I think we're still at the place where we might know kind of where some of the values loosely sit well together, but all of the fine tuning of all of the balancing of all of the abilities, weapons, and enemies, and everything across everything, I think that's still work in progress and part of a later phase when it'll all be truly complete and concrete, and at a point where we're like testing the fine tuning and mechanics and making sure it's a good system, or seeing what needs to be changed about it. That right there is literally beta era stuff. That is, we've got the complete system, now let's see what we can do to muck around with it. So that's, I don't think in alpha we're really going to have like the truest of balancing. That said, it looked like there was some amount of challenge. They could have died. It definitely seemed like they could have, botched the recording there. Had to go into God mode to salvage it or whatever. But they got through it, and I think there's enough room for making mistakes and working your way out of them with tactical gameplay that the game will provide. So if you do have your buddies that kind of screw around a little, you'll still with good tactics, it might take a little longer, but still be able to get through the stuff.
Yeah. I mean, my feeling is it should be similar to D&D. You need probably a healer, you need a fighter, and you need somebody to probably sneak ahead and undo some traps, unlock doors, and then after that, pretty much for permutations. You don't have to have a cleric. Um, yeah, if you're going to be spending time in a graveyard, everybody's probably going to want to bring some stuff that's going to help against undead, but you don't have to be, everybody does not have to be relying on um, uh, cleric abilities specifically in order to make it through. I mean, that's the whole RP part about it, is you shouldn't have to, your role should still be um, effective and desirable, even if it's not, completely the most efficient. You shouldn't have to have all 4 clerics running in order to defeat your content. Yeah, in an MMORPG, you have a contingent of people who want to speed run everything as fast as possible so they can do multiple runs. It's not just because they want to spend time in a dungeon. They want to run that dungeon like 3 times or 4 times that night, which is antithetical to my tastes. But there are people like that, yes.
Well, one of the other questions was, what are your thoughts regarding the active blocking shown during the November update? And I guess this would include the fact that they're looking at every class being able to active block, not just what we saw.
Yeah. I
We,
like active block. I love it. I love active block in Valheim. That's mostly what I do. I try to do that every fight.
The
It
block
gives
is the good
a
thing.
nice ping or a nice ding as they
There's
go off your shield.
there's kind of a couple of parts of active block that I like is not just being able to sit there and hunker down knowing that a bunch of damage is coming, but also if they do add the full like timed block system that if you hit it at the right time you can stagger or knock a chunk of stamina off the person that attacked you and take less stamina reduction for doing it or whatever the thing that powers it's going to be. um I like active block. I think every active block system should be cool. I always go back to Evie from Vindictus putting the crystal ball around, and then when things hit her, it just knocks the ball around a little, or if they hit her really hard, bounces all over the place. It's absolutely hilarious. But it's just, wizard going into block mode is I'm in a crystal bubble, you can't hit me, and it's pretty durable. It's a very substantial way to block. And situationally, it's great because then your tanky people in the group see, oh crap, the wizard's all shelled up. I better go and save them. So it has that visual cue to it as well. I like that. I liked in DCUO the block parry, dodgy sort of stuff that it combined with the anticipate that you had with the incoming attacks. It made it feel like you could manage encounters in a lot of different ways, whether it was getting out of the way of this and then blocking that, or just planning to block both and catch a heal afterward, or however you're going to manage the situation. I do like having those sorts of things. And I gotta say, I hate in games where you have a shield that's just a stat block. Like, I'm looking at you, Vanilla WoW. I don't know what they've done since then. But the idea that you've got a shield and it's like, oh yeah, it gives you a little defense and there's a chance that like you might parry. It's like, no, 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 no. I've seen dudes. I know dudes. There's literally one in chat right now who knows what it means to strap on armor and a shield and a sword and like go in and fight. And you are actively blocking a whole lot of stuff the entire time. It is not like a 5 or a 10% chance proc. That sort of numbers, like the early low level proc numbers for a chance that the shield would block, is literally the chance that some totally untrained person with a shield strapped to any part of their body would just have any incoming attack hit the shield. That's not indicative of somebody using a shield. So that's,
Well,
I like actually seeing like actual blocking, actually like proper defending yourself sort of thing with the shield, and it's not just the stat block and an evade chance.
again, RPGs are designed for the hero's journey. It's designed for the character, not the player. So it's not about how proficient the player is. It's about how proficient the character is. And yeah, you could have a sucky ass person who is weak as crap with a shield and not be able to do anything with it because they're really just a farmhand. They aren't a soldier yet. Have a shield, but they don't know how to use it, and they aren't really strong enough to be effective at it. So the point
Great.
is
Then
supposed to
they'll
be
get
that
knocked out of their hand.
the point is that you're supposed to be building your character up to do that, and you do that with stats.
yeah, or in
As
this case,
opposed
your
to
stamina would
active
drop
block.
faster.
So well, and Ashes doesn't really. I mean, not Ashes. Video games don't have pain yet. That would do. I mean, gameplay would be a lot different if we could literally feel pain and respond to it the way we would in the real world. Um,
Well, we can
but
also heal in video games in the way you can't in the real
I'm saying
world.
so. I'm saying it. You don't feel the pain, so you don't react like you normally would in video games. But if you could actually feel the pain, if you could actually feel how heavy the shield was, you wouldn't be blocking as well, probably as we can in a video
You
game.
could feel how heavy the
So,
shield is. I'm sure that we're at a point of time you could do that.
and then it wouldn't be fun. So we're not gonna see things
Well,
like
it's
that.
not meant to be a workout simulator either. It's meant to
I'm
be a
saying that's what
fun
I'm saying.
game. And so what I'm saying is the shield as a tool used by the character that you the player can implement is is the thing that I'm saying I really appreciate, not you know
But it's the
it-
player. So active block is really about the player. Active block is about the skills of the player,
well,
not the skills of the character. And so
yes, it's but
that's and so in an RPG, the skills of the character should trump the skills of the player.
this
Um,
is a game where skill matters, though. It has
there
been very
it is
clear that
action.
this is a
There
skill matters game.
there there is action combat in this game, so we're gonna have active block, and where you have active block, it has to mean something. It can't mean nothing. So yes, but what I'm saying is the flip side of that is also true because it's an RPG. There has to be some stats involved with it because it's not just about player skill; it's about character skill, and an RPG character skill has to be important.
I will say this: I would be okay with there being a sort of trade off that some people could have if they don't like and aren't coordinated enough or whatever to do active blocking, to alternatively be able to spec into a passive blocking system that it is just a chance sort of thing. Is it going to be as effective? Maybe.
It's
Is it
not
going to be
really
as
about
predictable? Maybe. I mean, you're going to be blocking things and getting your stamina knocked, when you're not necessarily expecting it, but it's going to save you.
not really chance though, right? It's that your character has that prowess. And it should be ideally that your character can have more prowess than the player. So I should be able to build a character that is uh, more accurate at archery than I am as a player.
Sure.
So that's going to involve stats.
Okay.
So that's why
But
stats have to be involved.
you the player are still aiming the character's shot and what they're going to be shooting at least designating the target for them, and that's
Well, in a
still a
game that
skill
has
component.
in a game that has action combat, that's true. And Ashes has that. But what I'm saying is
Well, even in WoW
RPGs,
you
the
still have to
focus.
designate a target.
Oh, you can do that with tab, right? You don't have to aim.
Yeah, well, you got to tab the right one though.
I mean, okay.
Deputy tab indeed. I feel like we've kind of gotten lost in the weeds on this one.
No, we've spent
I don't think
a
so.
good amount of time for each of the questions they've asked.
I think active I think blocking might also be kind of the word that might be a little bit of a catch here. That block might be right for some characters and some classes. I would imagine more like roguey thiefy types, maybe even rangers would do more of a like a tactical dodge retreat sort of thing. So instead of sitting there and taking one on the shield, that their sort of thing is more like doing a backflip or sliding to the side real quick or something to get out of the way. That it would work differently with the stamina considerations and such, but and obviously positioning, because you wouldn't be staying in the same place, those would be trying to move yourself out of the way. That could be, or maybe everybody's going to have block and dodge, and so everybody's going to be able to dive to make that deck save on the fireball that's incoming, as they, the player with the player skill, are able to.
It does sound like both. He commented, there was in the questions after the video, there was one actually where he commented on universal abilities. Well, I should read the whole thing.
Sure.
We're going to have certain universal abilities such as dodge and active blocking. So it sounds like, I don't know that all classes will have both, but it certainly sounds like some.
Yeah, he's mentioned that before. Yeah, I think in Everwinter Online, it was by class. So Rogue would have dodge, and Cleric might have dash or something like that. They had different ones.
Casters
Not
are going to
everything
have a
had
hell of a
active.
time, let me tell you, especially in PvP. One of the things that drove me nuts about Crowfall was trying to play a ranged crafter in a very mobile game that included some of these sorts of mechanics. It's so hard to cast a fireball, especially when you have like a 1.2, 1.5 second cast, which, in total cast to launch, the player you're targeting gets 2, maybe 3 seconds to move. They might not even be aware that you're casting at them, but they're just moving. And it was not fun, at least from afar. Things got a little bit easier up front, but I
Do
don't
you
know.
think that would have worked better if you have the spell like cast and held, and then you kind of click to throw it at the destination you want?
Probably.
Like you kind of, okay. I'm not going to say I have the solution to save that game's mechanics or anything.
Yeah,
Didn't play
no,
it
I
well
mean,
enough to really
probably.
say, but I think that's the first thing that comes to mind is like, well, if the charge up and the aim are built in, why don't we, do a little different sort of thing over there? But that is definitely a sort of interesting thing. Ranged attacks in games where it's active and there's movement, and then, are you going to have homing shots, or do people have to make the shots count? How fast are they going to travel? In first person shooters, a lot of times you can just get away with if you're aiming at the target and you press the click, you hit, and then the bullet animation that you see is just kind of confirmation, essentially, or the games, the thing has to actually go all the way there in it. Yeah.
Well, we're almost out of time.
Hmm.
One thing there was a funny story Steven told, and I think this highlights, Diggs, I know you've talked about the type of PvP players you would not like to play with. There was a question about whether or not players could heal monsters, as sort of in a PvP aspect, which I actually would like the opportunity to do that. The answer he gave was no, because of
Griefing.
yes, griefing.
That's the only reason why you would need to do that, he said.
Which I don't think is entirely true, but
I don't either.
he then told the story about being playing Lineage 2, and how he was in a guild that he apparently snuck into a big boss, a boss area. The other guild had the boss down to a certain health, and he healed the boss back up to 75%, just as a way to annoy them.
Repeatedly, right? Repeatedly did that.
So it's
And
just,
said that they had done it to his guild first.
yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, in the context of Ashes of Creation, you should get like near unclearable sort of corruption for something like that. I'm talking like however far the meter goes down, you're pretty much there. You have just committed an act of villainy. This whole game, the whole purpose of the settlers here coming to Vera is trying to make this place habitable and clear all the corruption. Here you are helping this corrupted beast against this.
It didn't say the enemy was corrupt.
I guess in the context of Ashes of Creation, anything that you're fighting that a raid boss is either corrupt or tainted by corruption. I think that's
don't know about that.
because if neither of those things are true, then we would be able to talk with an interface with them.
I mean, I think there'll be
and
battles
they could
with
still
Minotaur.
be they could still be our enemy.
And
They said
Minotaur.
Minotaurs are. They specifically said Minotaurs are tainted by the corruption. When I said in the Facebook things about dealing with the Minotaur, I said whatever. I just want to cut them down and fry them up, cook them, and eat them. And they were saying, whoa, you don't want to eat that. That's corrupted. They're all they're tainted. So no, they're corrupted. The Minotaurs are corrupted. That's kind of the thing that leaned to me the idea that any enemy that isn't of the former Varen races or whatever in the Tolnar is gonna be at a raid boss level is gonna be something that's already corrupt.
I mean, your question was somewhat facetious. They responded in kind, so I wouldn't take that as a definitive answer about corruption. But
Well, there's an answer right there in chat.
oh, I didn't see it. Domestic enemies. Yeah, I mean, there should just be some enemies. It's kind of like the gods. Just because the gods exist doesn't mean you'll want to worship them. Just because enemies aren't corrupt doesn't mean that they're gonna be interested in being friendly with you. But yeah, there was something else that he said. Was it that same thing where he was talking about stunlocking? I think stunlocking was a different thing, right?
Yeah, that was a different question. That it wasn't fun.
And it also made me double down on both of those. Made me double down on. I don't want to play this game with Steven. I don't want to be on the same server as Steven.
Now stunlocking.
I don't want to be on the same server as Maggie, because even though Steven was trying to say he doesn't want people to play the game like he used to, Maggie was like, no, some people love that. She wants to play it that way. And again, I don't want to be on the same server as people who think like that. That's kind of my point. So
yeah, no, they yeah, so this was Steven actually had made a comment that he didn't think people liked to play that way, that it wasn't fun to be either the person being stunlocked or the person doing the stunlock. And it made me laugh because it's like, no, there's people that's just what they love to do. That's fun for them. Like, and then that's where Maggie said, no, yeah, people like playing that way. I was laughing at his story because that's one of those very few instances where you really do get an insight into what he has been like as a gamer, playing MMORPGs. I think those examples are kind of few and far in between. I think everyone knows the historic, like his speech that he gave, because that was recorded, right? There was a speech within Arcage, I think.
oh yeah.
And, so there's hints there, but he doesn't necessarily regularly tell you about how he was as a player, because he's obviously, I think understandably making a game that he wants to play, that he enjoys, hoping that everyone else enjoys it as well. But this is just one of those really tiny instances, but I think it says so much that he's like, oh, well, yeah, it's a great story. I used to walk, I would go in and I'd heal the bosses back up, but no, we don't want that. That's bad. That's bad gameplay. I did it, but I don't know. It's just funny.
Yeah, it's just interesting. I was thinking that back in the day, our landmark EverQuest Next days, when Lock 6 Time was kind of convincing me maybe I would be willing to play on the same servers as PvPers, because I'd like to play with him. I like him as a person. I like Neuro as a person. And I think Neuro likes playing PvP games, but like PlanetSide too, I guess.
Well, if I'm playing a PvP game because they're giving me all the equipment and I'm just fighting people, sure. But if there's like resources on the line, I don't know.
Oh, then I realized yesterday morning. Oh, right. Neuro's a game hoe. I just didn't have that knowledge back then during EverQuest next. He plays anything, so it's
I'll play
not
a
like
lot of
he
stuff.
likes. It's not like he likes. It's not like he's a PvPer. He's just a game hoe who will play anything, including PvP games. And yes, I have enjoyed playing with him, but we didn't PvP in whatever we played together. Um, so yeah, I should modify that. And as I listen to Steven and Maggie tell stories about how they like to play, and as I watch them play, I'm like, yeah, I
Well,
want to be on the same server as those people.
to be fair, I did PvP a lot in Landmark. I was the housing the roofing enforcement committee. So I mean, there was that.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
know, if
yeah,
I'm
I turned PvP on.
seeing your shingles, if I'm seeing your rooftop shingles from below, and there's no boards and beams and things reinforcing it, that is an unsafe roof. It is going to fall through.
Yeah, I don't consider that PvP, but okay.
Well, I guess we're kind of out of time. You know, the cleric, I've talked about, you know, playing a healer. I think it looks very good. The animations that you mentioned, Diggs, I think looks pretty neat. Some of
Hmm.
the colors as well, the sort of light, the gold, the shiny, I
Hmm.
think fits well historically with a cleric. I think it was the melee player that had the hammer that kept coming down.
Fighter.
You know, when I
Hmm.
first saw that, I thought that was the clerics. Like I'm so used to the cleric mace, right? And that sort of being the animation or the visual that comes with a cleric spell. It seemed off. Like it seemed weird. I don't know that he was
No,
swinging
that's
yeah, but he's
that's
swinging
their hammer strike.
I know, but he's swinging a sword, and then this hammer comes down. It just looked weird.
I like it as this sort of man at arms sort of thing is like, oh no, I don't just use a sword. I'm that character you see on the cover of the fantasy gamer novel that's got like a spear on my back and a sword and like a couple hatchets and like a
But
bow and arrow
yeah,
and
it's
throwing
not
knives.
physical. It's not a physical hammer. It's a conjured hammer.
Mhm.
Um, cleric has cleric has
It does
the,
look clericy though. The
no,
animation
because it's
on it definitely
that's the
looks
that's the
like
color of essence. So the what do we have? Do we have tank? What do we have in Alpha 1? Tank
I
has
thought it was
javelin.
fighters.
Yeah, I got
No, no,
tank.
in Alpha no. No.
Was it tanks or
Uh,
was it fighter?
yeah, it was tank. And tank has
Okay.
javelin, which is a conjured golden spear that comes out and hooks, right? And draws you in. And the cleric version of that was the whip. So is from what we've seen so far, each primary archetype is able to conjure some type of weapon that looks golden from essence, is what it appears to be. They might change those effects, and we'll have cosmetics that will change effects. The colors of effects.
Well, they
So
should give that to the cleric because it looked like very clericy, and it kept happening. I wasn't paying attention to anything but the cleric. And Steven would cast a spell. It was an AE, and all of a sudden this hammer would come down. I thought initially, like, that's cool. That looks pretty cool for a cleric.
I agree
we
with
saw
you
that in the fighter demo.
100%. I agree with you 100% that it looks more clericy, even if that's the color and energy that it's supposed to have. I could see it being more like fierce and spiky and aggressive rather than this like, you know, beautiful exalted sort of, you know, faithy looking hammer. Like I want to see, you know, this, you know, real nasty, like it's got claws and teeth sort of hammer, like just a real mean sort of thing. Like that would make sense for a fighter.
What'd you say it was called? Hammer strike? Just call it.
No, I call it hammer
Uh,
strike. It doesn't have a name as far as we know.
they
We
should
don't know
just
what the
make
name,
it
actual
mimic
name of
it
it.
off of whatever weapon they have, because it would have made much more sense if it was a sword coming down after he swung a sword.
They have to do that
Yeah, it's not
animation
based
for
on
every weapon
I know.
type.
I'm just saying though, it'd make more sense.
But again, it's not based off of the weapon you're wielding. Just like the cleric has a whip that they can conjure, castigation. It doesn't matter what weapon they're wielding.
Just give me a mace
And
and a
it's going to be
shield.
this. But it sounds like what you're saying is you might prefer that to be a great sword rather than a hammer.
I think that would make more sense.
Well, I don't know.
Uh,
Hammers are pretty smashy.
Yeah, but how many
well,
melee
yeah,
characters
you
do you
could.
think are going to be using a hammer?
A lot.
And what
A
game?
whole lot.
What game do you see people using a hammer?
Any game where hammers
Everybody picks
are at
swords.
the same level as axes and maces and swords and stuff. Like if
Yeah, I would
they're
have a
all
cleric.
meant to be side grades of one another, and there might be some more I would imagine like stun debuff sorts of things rather than like bleeding and piercing and sorts of things. If that's more what you're rolling, yeah, I would imagine hammers. If I remember, even WoW vanilla, a double hammer rogue would be like knocking people out and keeping them knocked out.
When I play clerics, I use a hammer.
Yeah, that's just more
Yeah.
what I associate. So, a
And
mace.
usually that's to smash skeletons with, right? Because swords are not going to be piercing skeletons. Right?
Smash skeletons and smash armor. I gotta say, long swords kind of bounce off of armor. You might, bruise the person underneath, but you're not getting through the armor. Hammer, a mace, a flanged mace. A flanged mace is a piece of technology specifically designed to tear open steel armor like a can opener. So I definitely expect to see those if they've got a armor debuff on them.
Yeah, fighter. Most of the class names for fighter are related to blades, which is why I might be expecting great sword animation rather than a hammer animation for them. Got blade dancer, high sword, spell sword, shadow blade, blade collar. Um, they seem to be very swordy versus hammer. But we also don't know for sure. I mean, fighter is a weapon master. I think that is what. I think that is the archetype we were supposedly looking at was weapon master. In that previous demo. Um, but yeah, we might have to just see what if it's a weapon master, then they can wield any weapon. It's not too surprising for them to toss out a hammer.
Everyone can wield every weapon.
That too.
I'm going to be interested in seeing how the staff wand fighter is going to get through.
I mean, you can wield any weapon, but you can't master every weapon necessarily. So
F1 fighter.
What level can we do a secondary class or archetype?
what?
Sorry, I just the level. What level do we get to do a second?
30.
25? It's halfway. It's the midpoint. And the max is 50.
So then in an encounter like
25.
We just saw, I mean, you wouldn't be worrying about anything other than a cleric anyways, because nobody else would be healing you, basically. So all right.
Or you just kill them real fast and drink potions afterward.
Which do not drop. I guess I should save that for when we do questions. But
do not drop when you die.
yes.
Yep. You keep your meals, you keep your booze. And then next time I totally didn't even say anything about it. The sort of tactician, spotter, surveyor sort of person for NPCs that it looked like they're having a hard time knowing where they should camp and rest relative to where things would spawn and respawn. So having someone on the same tier as a surveyor, but instead that's more focused on where the enemy's at, where are they going to spawn, where will they show up, where do they patrol, what sort of enemies should we expect to see, based on the tracks and stuff, and like a more of like a tracker sort of processing tier class.
There was one other thing that stuck out. I know we're over, but just as they were moving, and actually you brought this to my mind talking about somebody that kind of scouted. It probably sounds stupid, but I think it's such a neat change in movement was Steven, I think, tried to climb up on a ledge, like jump onto a ledge to look to scout, and the character didn't quite reach it, but they added like it pulled themselves up. That kind of movement, I think, is well needed for an MMORPG that you don't find in many of them. So I don't know, just a little
Ledge grab is definitely nice for that game, for the verticality they want you to have.
Yeah, it just sort of stuck out when I saw him just jumped. It wasn't any sort of active skill or anything. He just reached just enough to be able to pull himself up. So
that was the one thing for me in Alpha 1, was really trying to test the see it go there sort of thing. And there were a lot of places where it felt like they were forced do not climb here ramps and slopes and stuff built in, or things where it was just not meant, like I could see the path ahead and how I would climb it and get there, but it just wouldn't let me. So that's definitely something good eye on that I'm hoping there's going to be a little bit more climbing and verticality, and like being able to hold your footing and slowly, make your way up a slope.
Yeah. Well, any last words? We will, I guess, next week get to the UI, get to weapons, get to the day and night cycle. Constellations look really cool. I'm not sure if they're going to be worth all the work, but we can talk about that next week. So, well, all right, everybody, have a great week. We will be back here next Sunday. And as always, join us on Discord if you want to have some more conversations. So, been talking a lot about Throne and Liberty there. So, anyways, off topic. Maybe we should start a show for it. Oh, wait, there's not enough information to start a show for it. And it's supposed to be released here soon.
You're digging up all kinds of information.
Oh, very, very little. Sorry. I know I said we were ending. Okay. Everyone have a great week, and we'll see you back here next Sunday.
Later, everybody.